National Association of Black Journalists. So our moderator today is Sarah Glover. She's an award-winning photojournalist and innovative digital journalist for more than 2 decades. Presently, she is the manager of the social media strategy at NBC-owned television stations based at 30 Rock in New York. Prior to joining, she worked at NBC 10 Philadelphia and Philadelphia Daily News and The Inquirer. Notably, Glover is the 21st president of the National Association of Black Journalists. She's had a successful freelance photographer career. She has been a successful freelance photographer for 2 decades, and her work has appeared in Jet Magazine, The Washington Post, and Black Enterprise. She serves on many advisory boards. She has made news headlines for her work with the Associated Press to update the AP Skybook's definition of boy. The critical update was designed to encourage limited use and context of the term when describing black men. She later asked the AP to capitalize the B in black when referring to people and communities. So I am very excited for her to serve here as our moderator. Before I turn it over to this panel, a couple of things I want to say to every woman in this room. So often we get caught up, and some of the younger women, I will say this to you, about your external beauty. So often we spend thousands of dollars, sometimes that we don't even have, to enhance our external beauty. While it is important, and it is a blessing to have beauty, what I want my gift and my legacy to be is that when you cultivate your mental ability, your prowess as an intelligent person, and when you cultivate who you are as a person, meaning from the heart, your beauty just accelerates, the external beauty accelerates. Because when you walk in a room, you have something to say. So often people say, wow, what an amazing person. They don't often, when you leave the room, and they want to continue the relationship. So we have so much to give as black women, and I will use every ounce of my power, and I want my legacy to be that I provided a platform, tools, and resources for black women to continue to lead. They keep talking about black women in the political arena, and that we as black women are gonna carry the vote. That's because we are a force to be reckoned with. Some people talk about our attitude, they talk about our ability to be so forceful in our conversation. You group that with intelligence and heart, there's no stopping us. So I just want to say thank you, and I want to call up our moderator and enjoy the panel. Thank you so much. I also want you all to enjoy this weekend. I am on the executive board of the Black Caucus, and so I'm very happy to be able to help sponsor this event. And lastly, I'm from Detroit. Grew up on, I am from Detroit. I represent Michigan's 14th district. I sit on appropriations. You want to know what anybody believes and love, follow their money. And so this country, where do we take the money that we collect and what do we do with it? And I sit on government oversight to hold accountable an administration that was elected to office, and I'm still trying to figure that one out. Enjoy.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you all for coming out and to join this engaging conversation. We're going to jump in and introduce our panelists. We have a phenomenal group of women that have gathered from all parts of this country to talk to you all about the C-suite and how they got there and how they're not just thriving, surviving, but lifting up and bringing others along their path. First, I'd like to bring up Michelle Brown in alphabetical order, and I will talk about Michelle as she takes the seat. Michelle is the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, Commercial of United Airlines. She works so closely with the airline's commercial and shared services and digital technology teams. She provides financial planning, analytical support, profit-driven focus, and she also oversees United's Investor Relations Department. Prior to this, she was a managing director of customer service at the George Bush International Airport. She has also guided and implemented many things that have been successful under United's signature customer offerings, and so on and so on. She also we might note how she began her career, and that was at American Airlines. She's honored with the Bessie Coleman Aerospace Legacy Award, named to Crane's Business Chicago's 40 Under 40. She has her bachelor's in economics from Duke and holds an MBA from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Another Michigan tie there. So welcome, Michelle Brown. Next, we will ask Tanya Hallett to join us. Tanya is the Executive Director of Human Resources, Global Manufacturing of General Motors Company. I think they're based in Detroit. Yeah. Good folks at GM. Tanya is a human capital professional. She has more than 20 years of broad-ranging experience in HR. She was appointed as the Executive Director of Human Resources, Global Manufacturing for GM. She's responsible for leading people strategy, supports the continuous dynamic evolution of the company. Prior to this appointment, she served as Director of Human Resources for Global Cadillac. She helped lead organizational transformational efforts, and she offers must positioning that's positively impact the company. She began her career at GM in 1996. She progressed through several assignments in labor relations, in the field of HR leadership positions, and many other stops along the way, including TouchTunes Interactive Networks. She holds her Master of Science in Manufacturing and Management from Kettering University, a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial and Labor Relations from Cornell, and she is involved in many service organizations, and she's a volunteer servant. She likes to support initiatives for enhancing educational opportunities for at-risk youth and breast cancer research. And she's the proud mom of 3 boys and a proud wife. So welcome. Next, we will have Carla Harris. I think Carla is actually en route, so we're going to pause for Carla. We're going to do an introduction for her when she gets in the room. Wendy Lewis from McDonald's. Wendy is the Vice President, Global Chief of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement for McDonald's. She's responsible for guiding McDonald's global diversity and inclusion efforts, and we want to note and inclusion, how important that is a part of the equation. And she helps to enrich the organization's history and culture of opportunity, growth, and economic impact. Her primary focus is to direct the diversity is inclusion, business strategy, and that value proposition for all employees to be engaged for better business results. That major development is also to execute some modern and progressive educational platforms and build culturally intelligent leaders, and that's significant because the company is looking to grow leadership. Prior to McDonald's, Wendy spent most of the last 3 decades, actually the last 30 years, at one of my favorite places, because I love baseball, at Major League Baseball. She developed and implemented numerous innovative and successful metric-driven strategies, and I just want to amplify that again, what a big deal that is to have a black woman in a corporate office of the MLB or any major sport. So hats off and big hat tip to her. She has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and an MBA from J.L. Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University in Evanston. So let us welcome Wendy Lewis. Next, we'll welcome Karen Morton. Karen is the Senior Vice President and Global Chief Compliance Officer at Liberty Mutual Insurance Group. She focuses on global compliance in the ethics group. She's responsible for enterprise compliance strategy and policies, compliance training, oversight, companies' legal and regulatory, operational risk assessment processes, and ensuring implementation of effective mitigation strategies. And prior to this role, she was the Deputy General Counsel for the Litigation and Coverage Group at Liberty Mutual. She has had a career at Liberty Mutual since 2006. She's also worked in the area in the role as Vice President and Counsel for Employment Benefits and Corporate Real Estate. Prior to Liberty Mutual, she was with John Hancock Financial Services, and she has her BA from Tufts, a JD from Northeastern University School of Law. She has received many awards for championing diversity in the legal profession. Specifically, welcome Karen Morton. Next, we have Susan Reed. Susan is Managing Director, and that is for the Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Morgan Stanley. And she is a colleague of Carla, so we're excited to have both of them with us. She's responsible for the firm-wide diversity and inclusion efforts, and that includes hiring, retention, development, and advancement of a diverse group of employees. She has more than 15 years of HR experience across many industries. And when she joined Morgan Stanley in 2008, that was as a human resources business partner in the investment management division. She has a very long resume, very impressive resume in HR. She also supports and leads programs and helps students of color at New York University. Broad range of talent. She attended New York University and has a degree in economics and political science. Welcome, and thank you for being with us, Susan. Next, we will welcome Nilka Thomas. She's the Vice President of Talent and Inclusion at Lyft. And I officially have never met a Nilka before in my life. I love that name. You are a star. She serves as their strategic business partner to senior leadership focused on a broad-based and transformational talent agenda, which is clearly designed to recruit, develop, and retain the very best innovative talent in business. And they are surely looking to build upon the world-class organizational culture. She helps sustain and uplift experiences for members inside the workplace so that they feel successful and fulfilled. Prior to joining Lyft, Nilka spent 13 years at Google providing strategic thought leadership on issues affecting women and communities of color, as well as designing programs to cultivate the next generation of Black and Latino tech leaders right in the communities where they live. Welcome, Nilka. So I love this panel is bi-coastal, right? So we've got Nilka, and then our last panelist before we maybe have Carla join us, we'll introduce her at that time, but our last panelist in this go-round is another West Coast, doing things big on the West Coast like Nilka, Bari Williams, Bari A. Williams. Welcome, Bari. She's the Vice President of Legal, Business, and Policy Affairs at All Turtles. It's a startup advisory role in the tech industry. She's a published author in the New York Times, Wired, Fortune, and Fast Company. She's the former head of business operations for North America at StubHub. You know that place where you can get tickets at the last minute? She was responsible for business planning and operations to manage and oversee technical, internal, and external metrics. You know, data and metrics, how important that is. I hope, even though that isn't maybe necessarily the thrust of what we're going to talk about, but I'm glad that's in your bio because we think of the jobs of the future. Data is an important part of that discussion. So she's at the forefront of this in the Bay, in Silicon Valley. She also serves as an advisor to startups in the enterprise and e-commerce space. Prior to StubHub, Bari was also a senior commercial attorney at Facebook, supporting internet.org connectivity efforts. She built drones and supported those efforts, satellites, lasers, and supported the company's supply chain. She also took a successful passion project of creating and implementing Facebook's supplier diversity program, which was just launched 3 years ago.
You can go there now.
Barry,
You can go there now.
I'm going to stop myself. Barry,
Barry.
thank you, dear.
My father-in-law and brother-in-law are both named Barry.
I love it.
It happens all the time.
Bari. Bari's a graduate of UC Berkeley with a BA in Mass Communications. She has her MBA from St. Mary's College of California, and she has an MA, another Master's in African American Studies from the University of California, Los Angeles. And she has a JD from the University of California, Hastings College of Law. Welcome, Bari. This is so exciting. I'm about to pass out that I get to stand with these wonderful, amazing women. They are all role models to me, and I know they are role models to you. So we are excited to have conversation, and we'll just ask some questions, and I'll ask our panelists to jump in. After we go through the question and answer portion, there will be the opportunity, after we go through the discussion, there'll be opportunity for questions. But I think that the best way, because there's so many engaged people in the room, I can see you all sitting on the edge of your seat, we are actually going to pass out note cards that you might be able to write your questions. And Denise is in the corner of the room back here. And Denise Tolliver is the lovely staff member. She runs communications for Representative Lawrence's office, and she is doing a great job with that team to put this event together today. So she will have business cards. She'll be moving around the room, so don't hesitate to grab a business card, and I'll be able to get through questions quickly. But as we jump in, also wanted to, at the top and at the bottom, thank Representative Brenda Lawrence for putting on this program. You know, her service is certainly incredibly appreciated from her constituents in Michigan, but know that we hear you across the country, and certainly this discussion today is an example of her great impact and legacy that she has established as a Congresswoman in our government. So with that, we're going to start with the turning point. Everyone has a turning point in their career. And sometimes that turning point happens before you get a big title or before you get a career. When I read these bios, and they are so impressive, we weren't just going to jump into discussion. We have to hear and know who we're talking to. And what impresses me so much about this panel is the number of degrees that we have up here. We might have like 20 degrees or something, 25, 30, I don't know, I didn't count. But those are decisions, those are turning points in your life. And so I'd like to open it up to the floor to see if one of these ladies would jump in and like to talk about a particular turning point in their life, whether it was upon the emerging part of your career or even at this point as a mid-career and or veteran woman of the C-suite. Who would like to jump in?
I'll be happy.
Okay.
Thank you. My turning point, and this is why I think I'm a little anxious and wanting to share it with you, it was a collection of one that was my Is this better?
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
It was a culmination of a turning point for my professional life as well as my professional life. So I was doing very, very well in my role, specifically at baseball, and the opportunity came for that next educational leap to pursue my master's. Now, what's the big deal about that? There was a great deal of risk in me making that decision because the pecking order of who should be next was the challenge. I was in line to be next, but I was asked to step aside and let someone else go in my place. And I decided at that point of time that if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. So at risk, I moved my career forward. Now, when you do that and the organization continues to support you, know that things are never the same. I was actually told, well, you go ahead and do this thing, but understand, as far as I'm concerned, you are not in school. You are not pursuing a full-time degree. So in other words, as far as I'm concerned, what we expect of you professionally is the same level of work. So I say that was a turning point because I knew that it came with a great deal of consequence, but I knew making that move would make every difference to myself and my family for going forward. So the point that I want to make about turning points are, you know when they happen, they do not come without consequence. And you need to make the best decision, not just for yourself, but for others who are a part of yourself as possible. But you do need to make them, and you need to take those big, bold moves when they do come your way.
Turning appalling?
I'm happy to share the turning point for me because there was actually one that was relatively recent. So as was mentioned, prior to joining Lyft, I'd spent 13 years at Google, and over those 13 years I had a wealth of incredible opportunities, grew my career, lived all around the world, and on top of that was working for an organization that I was really proud of, and it was doing really great work and had a huge platform. And so when I started to think about that next opportunity, there was a big consideration around leaving what felt like a very nestled and sort of nurturing place for me in terms of the support system I had there, the reputation and brand that I had built over the years, and the impact that I was truly fulfilling with my team. And so that decision to leave was not an easy one, and it brought along a set of other changes, including moving out back to California. I was actually out on maternity leave when I made the decision to consider another opportunity, and obviously was leaving a lot behind. I think that what was actually most compelling at the end, and to Wendy's comments, there's consequences to everything that you do. But what I saw as the biggest opportunity was to leap into an environment and an organization where I felt like I could come in at the ground floor and have some impact. And so one of the things that I think that our industry, the tech industry, has really sort of missed out on is thinking about how do we build diversity and inclusion into everything that we're doing really early on. And the reality was, I was in an 80,000 person organization that really just had started too late. And so our ability to turn the ship was diminished in a lot of ways, and some of the resolve to do that in sort of aggressive ways as I thought necessary wasn't necessarily there. And so this opportunity to sort of change my circumstances was not just about myself, but really the impact that I thought I could have on our industry and helping to think about how new tech could embrace diversity and inclusion much earlier on when they're 1,000 person companies or 2,000 person companies versus 50,000 people companies, and they just really don't have the right cultural foundation to focus on diversity in the ways that they ought to. And so it was a professional leap. I didn't have the support system or the sponsorship in that organization, so I had to take a bit of a bet on myself that I could create that in a new company, and it was the right thing to do in the end.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question to you directly. You use the word sponsorship. This is such an important term that we need to have a pause and kind of unpack that, because mentorship and sponsorship are things that all professionals need, right? And so navigating and being able to navigate without having, a pillar within your career development to help guide you is a challenge. And so that is an absolute risk. I'll throw it back to you and anyone else in terms of sponsorship and mentorship. How do you identify people that can help you make some of these decisions? And sometimes they're outside of your field. Sometimes they're outside of your workplace. But how do you identify individuals that will help have a strong impact on advancing your career? How did you do that, and how do you do it?
For me, what's interesting about Wendy having been at Major League Baseball, I had a friend, I wanted to connect with him because he knew Amy Trask. And Amy Trask was the CEO of the Raiders, and she started off as their junior counsel and then kind of rose through the ranks. And for me, for her to survive in that environment, I've got to talk to this woman. And she was kind enough to actually to do it. And from there, I also have another mentor who, essentially said, I don't remember which one of the women said it earlier, but I think it may have been Wendy, if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else will. I have a mentor who is a general counsel for an NFL team. And I remember calling him one day about something that was happening. I found out that a white male coworker with the same number of years experience made more money than me. And I mean, it's the tale as old as time, right? Like, everybody probably could tell that story in here. But I was really upset. And I said, well, what do you think, how should I handle this? Because it's time to put together the promotion package, and I have my arguments and all that jazz, but how do I, what should I say? And he was like, the same thing that you just said to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't even know why you're on the phone right now. Like, you know what it is you need to do, you know how you need to say it, and you know who you need to say it to. And no one is gonna be a better advocate for you than you. So go in and make the case. So that's where it does come back to data. Was being able to I keep every single receipt, record, anything I can in terms of what have I done, How did this drive revenue for the business? How did this help my business partners get their deals done faster, or whatever it may be, whatever is important to your company. But also having somebody on the inside as a sponsor is so clutch, and people pay a lot of attention to mentorship, which is great. But sponsorship is what is gonna actually boost you up. It's having someone internally who will say, no, I think Bari is doing really good work. Or if they're even better, they will bring you to the meeting next time. So it's not just about, you know, making sure that you have external advocates or people that you can speak to, but you need people actually in the rooms when decisions are being made that can vouch for you and say, you know what, she's great. Or if that, you know, bring you to the meeting next time.
You know, Bari, I'd like to just jump in on that because I completely agree. I actually, when I talk to some of my team members, my mentees, I talk to them and I break down the science of what I call this whole advocacy thing that we're looking for. So I say there are sponsors, there are mentors, and there are brokers, right? And you don't see this everywhere, but this is Tanya speak. And so I'm very clear about sponsors, and it's very much what Bari just said in regards to that person who's in a position to be in the room, whose influence and credibility can just say, and put their name on you, and then all is good, right? So we want to seek those people out, and we look for those people. But then you have your mentors, and I say mentors, be selective about who you choose to claim as your mentor, because that's a person that's not just a part-timer, and usually it's a selfless piece of work for them. They don't go around telling people all who are their mentors, right? Because what you share with them is usually very personal, and they're there for your lows and your highs. Because when your lows are happening, they're there to tell you, remember your resiliency, right? To pull out your grit, to get you back on top, and then cheer for you again. So be really selective about those people. And what I do with my team is I often say, let's talk about your network analysis, right? So who's your sponsor? Hopefully you can have more than one, but they're hard to find, right? And then your mentors, let's think about that. But then those brokers, what are brokers? Brokers are the reasons you network. Brokers are the reasons you seek out conferences like this. Brokers are why you go to those ERG meetings to meet other leaders and managers. Brokers may be at a higher level than you. They may be in different functions. They may be in the role you want to go to. But they are wise, sage people who know people. And who, once they start knowing you, they can connect you with other people. So I can make it very simple. Think of sponsors, think of mentors, and think of brokers. And so I think brokers are a little bit underplayed, right? And so that we're not leveraging our network so people, our peer group, people who may be in positions that are maybe not as high as yours or even higher, just knowing all the great things that you're doing, they then become people who go and say, because to a broker, you're a commodity to them. Good brokers want to be able to make good connections for people, right? And you have to expect, the expectations with a broker isn't they're not going to promise to get you anything, but they're going to connect you with some people. A mentor, I have mentors that have been in my life for over 20 years. They were with me right when I graduated from college, and now they're retired, and I've called them on the golf course, and they've stopped to talk to me about a challenge that I've had, right? Because they're not letting go, because they're still reaching for my North Star, because it was about my North Star, right? It was less about them. And then I have those sponsors, and here's the thing about sponsors, very good to have, but there's a huge what's in it for them. So if they're going to put their name on you, you got to deliver so they can do that again. So there's a little bit of a what's in it for them for a sponsor. So I always try to make sure that people understand the expectations of the relationships and look to have all three and really double down on getting more brokers. So network and let people know your good works.
I just am blown away. I took a whole bunch of notes, so I'll be tweeting these out later. Do we have a hashtag for this session? Okay. I'm calling it Boss Ladies. So add the Congressional hashtag plus Boss Ladies so people can find us. What is it?
Hashtag fire.
Fire, all right. And then add the fire in the tweet, right? Amazing. You just broke that down. That was serious knowledge. We're excited to add our final panelist, Miss Carla Harris. Join us up here. Yay. The dedication, the hustle is real. We appreciate you so much for being here. Carla, I'm going to introduce you. She is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director at Morgan Stanley, where she also serves as a Senior Client Advisor. Previously, she headed the Emerging Manager Platform at Morgan Stanley, the equity capital markets effort for the consumer and retail industries. Ms. Harris has extensive industry experience in tech, media, retail, telecommunications, transportation, industrial, and health sectors. She served as a senior member of the Equity Syndicate Desk and in the Mergers and Acquisitions Department at Morgan Stanley. She was appointed by President Obama to chair the National Women's Business Council. She's the author of the books Expect to Win and Strategize to Win. Ms. Harris holds an AB in economics from Harvard University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Welcome, Ms. Harris. So we will continue our discussion. I'm going to throw out a few more questions, and folks, please jump in. I want to jump to the hair discussion, okay? We're going to get back into some business talk, but I want to jump to the hair discussion. And really, quite frankly, I think because as Black women, when we walk in the room, who we are physically defines us, right? More so maybe than any other group of people, human beings walking this earth. Black women walk in the room, there's all kind of adjectives that pop out of people's heads. And hair are one of those things that also is a part of that discussion and is a part of what defines us and makes us great. But in this debate of natural hair, you know, primarily for women of color, women like us, how do you all, what is your take on this debate, particularly in the C-suite? What are some of your experiences and or takeaways of things that you've experienced around natural hair for women in the C-suite who are working and thriving in boardrooms?
I'd like to respond. So about 6 years ago, I decided to let my hair go natural, and so I had been at my organization for several years. And I remember it was a Memorial Day weekend, and I went to my stylist, and she like clipped off all the perm, and like here I was. So I showed up, and so it was an interesting experience. So first I come home, and my mom, who at that point was, my mom just recently passed away, God bless her, but at the time my mother was probably about 82. And she asked me, so she was my first voice of what I could reasonably expect. She's like, oh, she says, you really did it. And she said, how is that going to be received by the people at your work? My mother was 82, right? So her frame of reference was very different. So it made me stop and think, because for me it was a non-issue. I had, been growing the perm out, so like that was the end result. I had planned on that. So it really made me stop and think that, you know what, I needed to have in the ready a response for welcoming comments of interest and curiosity, and comments that just may have been just stupid, right? But it really helped me prepare for what my elevator speech was going to be on that Tuesday after Labor Day when I showed up at work, right? So frankly, God rest my mother's soul, I'm glad she asked me the question, right? So moving along, I show up on Tuesday after Labor Day, and I got a lot of reactions. Most people were like, oh my God, you look 10 years younger, and that was positive. And then more importantly, a few people said, oh, your hair is different. That's neutral, and that's a lack of understanding. And other people said, oh my God, I almost didn't recognize you. And then someone said, so is this the new Karen, right? So I had to have a standard response. But the most important response I got was from the head of our human resources or talent. She says, Karen, I really like your hair. She said, I'd like to educate myself. Is your hair now what we would call natural? And frankly, that was one of the most refreshing questions that I had received in terms of a response, because it was someone who sought to understand, who sought to be more knowledgeable about all the D&I issues, who really wanted to learn. And she was a white woman, and I welcomed that. And I figured to myself after that, if that's the head of human resources asking me that question, then this organization has the right leadership in that space, right? Because that was really good. And and then my response to people who didn't say things that I thought were appropriate, I just said, yep, got a new do. And kept it moving, right? Kim, keep it moving. That's what I did. I just kept it moving after they asked me that. And then I just want to end up with this comment. Recently, I went late back to work, and I didn't change my ID. In our non-employee security force, they were contractors. I had to try to get back into my building, and literally this white contractor wouldn't let me in my building to go up to my office to get me because my license didn't look like I look now. So at the end of the day, you say to yourself, so it was a teachable moment, which I was able to share with the appropriate people, but several days later, because at that moment I couldn't figure out how to provide a teachable moment to this contractor. But you realize it's rewarded when young African-American women come up to you, and one with tears in her eyes saw me at the elevator. She said, I'd like to introduce myself to you. I said, it's lovely to meet you. Where do you work? And she said to me with tears in her eyes, I just want you to know that we all noticed that you changed your hair, and we figured if you could be successful wearing your hair like that, then we've got a chance. And at that moment, I was really glad that I did it. And I also shared that with my mom, too.
My story is a little different. So you know how certain things happen and you will always remember the rest of your life where you were when that happened? I will never forget the day that I came into baseball, when I left on a Friday with the perm and I came back on a Monday with it braided, because remember back in the day, that's what we had to do. We went to sort of braid conversion first, to it grows out, and all of this. I have to tell you, that's a day I'll never forget, because I caught holy you know what. Wow. And now this was many, many years ago, but the people who broke my heart were the black folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had one of the most delightful women in the world, we are still friends today, who was the one that came up to me and said, how could you? You have set us so far back.
Oh my goodness.
And my response was, because I wore robes and stuff all through college, I've always loved natural hair. I said, you know what, the reality is I have not advanced, because this is really naturally what I do. This is naturally who I am. And if not me, who? And if not now, when? So I find it very interesting that legislation just happened last year that says you cannot terminate or mess with me at work because of natural hair. Guys, this is 2000, see what I mean? I was trying to say 2019. See, that's what happens. You have irreparable brain damage when these kind of things happen to you.
Too much information.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So I say that to say, for some of us, that's going to be a very smooth kind of experience, and that's what you want to do. I guess what I want you to know is, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you're feeling, you authentically want to express, do that. But if you don't want to do that, don't do that. This is not about you feeling good, better, indifferent, but just know folks have feelings. They will share that with you, and you just protect and defend who you are. But what I love about this modern day and age is we all celebrate ourselves in such amazing ways today that would have been absolutely unthinkable for us to do before. So I just have to tell you that back in the day, it wasn't quite so simple and straightforward as it is now.
Thank you. Carla.
I want to add a small comment to what both ladies said, and maybe this is more personal to me, but I think you can't get more conservative than a bank, right? You just can't. I mean, we are so conservative in every way. And I went through my natural hair transformation also at Morgan Stanley. Carla remembers me probably when I had a relaxer, and it was a journey for me, right, to come from having the relaxer and then making the decision and going through the transition. And I remember for a long time struggling in that transition phase, right? Like the braiding, what do you do? I think the struggle with natural hair, there's definitely a struggle with our white colleagues and our white counterparts, but we also have our own struggle with it, right, to your point. And I think we first have to work on getting ourselves to a place where we're comfortable and accepting of what God gave us, what grows out of our head. And I can only speak for myself. I went on a journey. Growing up as a kid, I had, of course, natural hair, and then I remember battling with my mother to get a relaxer, and I finally did, and I thought that was it. And what I didn't, I think, appreciate for many, many years, and I love all forms of black hair, whether you have a relaxer, whether you have a natural. But for me, what I didn't realize is how much of my life I spent trying to keep my hair right when it was in that relaxed state. Keep it right, for work, for life. If it was raining, if it was humid, right? Trying to keep it right. There was so much that went into that, and how much it prevented me, quite frankly, from doing the things I needed to do. Exercising, working out, enjoying life, because I had to keep it right. And then all of the backup that I had to do if I was going out, right? And what if it rained? What if it was humid? So what I would say is, the journey, definitely, there's a journey between us and white colleagues and white counterparts, but there's a part of the journey that's about us and self-acceptance, and I think a lot of us are still on that journey, and I would encourage us to keep exploring that journey. And if you see a black woman who's going through the journey of going from being relaxed to being natural, support her. right? And our hair comes in all different, styles. It drives me crazy, this thing we have now about grading our hair. This 1A, B, C, whatever. It just drives me insane. We have to stop that. And I think, there's a journey that we have to go on in supporting each other, quite frankly, as we transition, for those of you who choose to transition to natural hair.
Carla?
Yeah, Sarah, the point that I want to make is a little different, and that is, I think what's important for us to understand, especially professionally, depending on what lane you're going to be in, is every job has a uniform. I don't care what it is, right? So from McDonald's to the hospital to a conservative investment bank. So I think the authentic thing to think about when you are in that lane and you're going through your career is it authentic for you to go into a specific area if you're not willing to wear the uniform, right? And it's inauthentic to say, for example, that I'm going to go to a Wall Street firm and you know what, I'm going to wear shorts and a pull-down shirt because I'm that good, my intellect is better than anybody else's, and they're going to have to take me like I am. It's inauthentic to make that call, because if that is inconsistent with the uniform, you're not going to be successful there. So back when I started in investment banking in the 80s, the uniform was you didn't see anybody with braids, you didn't see anybody with locks, you didn't see anybody with natural hair. And I would flip it to you to say this just wasn't a black woman issue. If a blonde had come with all the boofy stuff going on, or the Farrah Fawcett look, she wasn't going anywhere either, right? So there was a certain uniform that everybody had to wear. So I think when you're thinking about being in the C-suite, look around and say whether or not that's an environment that is accepting, whether you'll have any latitude there, or whether or not you are prepared authentically to wear the uniform. Now today, I'm happy to say the hair thing is one real piece of evidence that things have changed. I really don't think people are evaluating people now by the hair. There was a time that I would have said to a young African-American woman or man, make sure that you look like the uniform. You want to be a VP, you need to look like a VP. So I want you to walk around and look at what VPs look like so that it's easy for people to see you as a VP and easy for people to give you the nod. Now I will tell you, it doesn't matter if that hair is straight, if it's locked, if it's braided, if it's natural, it doesn't matter. But there is still a uniform even in 2019. So when you're thinking about going to the C-suite, you got to think about whether or not you're prepared to wear the uniform, whatever that is. And today, it doesn't involve hair.
Would anyone else like to speak to hair?
Yeah, it's hair and it's also the uniform. So for me, I showed up today in jeans and a top that is business casually. I work in tech, and so I do not, what's my authentic self and what our uniform is you can get away with jeans, t-shirts, flip-flops, what have you.
That's exactly right. And if I showed up like this in your environment,
Then they would say, oh my God, you're so overdressed.
That's exactly right. I would not be accepted. It's the wrong uniform. That's the point that I'm making.
And that's exactly why I wanted to piggyback off of that, because I think that's exactly right. For me, going into tech was for me to be my authentic self. I do my best work when I am my authentic self. And it took going to Facebook. I went through that entire interview process with straight, flat ironed hair. And then I showed up day one with curly hair, and they're like, oh, your hair's different. And I was like, surprise. This is really what you bought and paid for. But it also, to me, I decided to go natural because I have two kids. One, my son, I wanted him to see that natural hair was beautiful, and not particularly he goes to a private school. And I said, no. You need to understand satin pillowcases and bonnets and what real combs, wide tooth combs look like, and the whole bit. And then I had a daughter. And that is really what made me kind of understand why people give their kids perms. Having to comb their hair every day is the bane of my existence. And that is actually why I ended up getting these twists, is because somebody wasn't going to survive the fall. So it was me or her. But I also think that I wanted her to see that hair can look, she's 4. So she's like, oh, Mommy, you got new hair. And I said, yes. And she said, I love it. I would like some braids too. And so for me, it's very important that it's just like the coworkers see it, your kids see it. And so whatever the choice is, and that's the beauty and the diversity of black hair, is like you could come in here in the most fabulous wig, weave, natural hair, cut it off, braid it, do whatever. But to Carla's point, if that is not the uniform where you are, you have to be cognizant of the fact that maybe that environment is not for you.
Very good. Any other natural hair comments? You guys did it.
Really quickly.
Sonia? Okay.
It's okay. Look, I just wanted to add, everything that's been said has really resonated with me. And at General Motors, I think that diversity and inclusion is very important, and we talk about it a lot, and we have a lot of great actions to continue to move ourselves forward to be in the forefront. Yet, about 3 months ago, being the most senior African-American woman in the company, when I came in with braids that were at the bra level because I was going on vacation, it gave everybody pause. And no one said anything negative, but there was right? And so it did say that, did you bring braids to the C-suite? And so it was one thing for the C-suite to talk about those to become managers or maybe even directors that may have braids, but are you bringing this to the 39th floor? And but not with a question of you should not do. And what was very encouraging for me was much what you experienced, Karen, where I went and I happened to be in a global webinar where people from around the world were watching, and I was one of the HR leaders that was speaking. And when I got back to my office after the webinar, my phone was flooded with emails and text messages from employees saying, yes, you looked fabulous. I'm so glad that you did that. And because just a year ago, there's some colleagues here where we were talking about, for the summer we have to kind of get our hair done and to go and do your summer stuff and then get your hair redone to come back, because it just wasn't as acceptable for certain people, right? And so I feel really good sitting here with my curly twists. I feel really good. I did go onto the 39th floor and someone said, oh, you're changing your hair again. Are you trying to be incognito? And I said, well, if you think there's a second one that you have that have access to the 39th floor, I want to go meet her, right? So that's not a reason for people to say, oh, I don't know who you are anymore because you changed your hair. You know how many of us are up in here. It's me. So I do feel that we are continuing to say, quite frankly, it's a sad conversation, right? Because we're the only ones that have to talk about this hair thing, right? And it precedes our intellect, all the degrees that you said are up here, it precedes all of that because we have to talk about our hair. And it's just kind of sad. And it's like India Ari says, I am not my hair, I'm so much more. So let's talk about that story.
Very good. Would you like to jump in on that?
I was just going to add one thing. I obviously don't have natural hair. I haven't gone on the journey other than when I've had braids, but I would say what we're discussing goes beyond your hair. It's the same if I'm on the executive floor and I have I love color, and so I'm wearing blue or I wear something prominent. People notice, and I've become just more comfortable in saying thank you. They'll see you. And it is wonderful that the uniform is evolving and it's changing. I work at United Airlines, and there are multiple people who have natural hair. It's a very accepting environment, but I think it's just being conscious of, you're noticed. We're often in rooms where we're one of few or the only. It's not unreasonable that you stick out, but it's not always a negative, because I've noticed even if my hair changes, people will say something. Sometimes people say things that are maybe well-intentioned, but kind of not well communicated. And if it's the right opportunity, I'll acknowledge it and correct it. But if it is an attempt to be helpful, or just an acknowledgement that they saw me and that something is different, I just own it and say thank you. People are acknowledging that I'm in the room. If you're comfortable with the uniform that you bring and wear every day, do that. And it's great to now be in a place where it is evolving, but it doesn't, if you're natural or not, it still happens.
That's a really great point. I'm going to come back to you right away, Michelle. I have another question. We're going to move on topics. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the come up, but now I'm going to just jump over the come up and go to the level up type questions. So Michelle, I would love to know what suggestions you have or strategies that you have for women who work so hard every day. They excel. They are bringing home the bacon, not just for themselves, but for their company and their corporate structure, for their supervisor. They're doing great work, but they don't receive the recognition. They don't get a promotion. They don't get the thank you, public thank you, or even from a team meeting to a staff meeting. What suggestions do you have for women that find themselves where they're trying to level up their career, they're trying to take it to the next step, particularly seeking a promotion, seeking that next step, next title position on the way to the C-suite? They're not getting the promotions that they feel they deserve, even are warranted. So what suggestions do you have for them?
I have so many suggestions, but I'll be brief. A good friend of mine, she often reminds me, she says, Michelle, work smarter, not harder. Yeah. And by doing that, it's a couple of things. One, just putting your head down and doing great work is not enough. You have to tell your story. You have to promote yourself. You have to get comfortable doing that. I probably, I am someone, a couple of us were talking about it. We were raised such that people told you, put your head down, be deferential. It's better to be heard and not seen. Or not to be, you know what I mean. And that doesn't get you very far in corporate America, or anywhere, quite frankly. And to work smarter, not harder, is not spending more hours in the office. It's saying, like, take a half an hour, take an hour, have coffee, build your network of sponsors and brokers and mentors. Go to a networking event, publish content on LinkedIn, do things so people have an understanding of how you're contributing. We all do incredible things. Use the resources that are available to you. Within our company, we've started Twitter, and it's been surprising. I don't like to tweet all that often. I'm not really all that engaged on social media, but when I do, the reactions that you get, like I'm senior in our company, but other senior executives will acknowledge, like, oh, you're doing this and this and this. And I'm like, I've always been doing this and this and this. It just now has a platform. And so really I leave it with you, like, think about how you can work smarter. You have to find a way to kind of tell your story of what you're doing, how you're contributing. Don't take that for granted. Even if you do great work, people don't always see it. Make it very clear for them. Be comfortable using the data, state the facts to tell what you have, how you've contributed, and tell your story. Like, it's easy on social media. Like, if you get it in a regular cadence, maybe once a month, post content on LinkedIn, put a picture from something that you've attended, reach out to someone who you've met, do something so that you're advancing your own narrative, because it just doesn't happen, and we work too hard. There are too many in our company. I now, and I'd say all of us have a responsibility. You all work with somebody who you know is incredible, who isn't getting the recognition that they deserve, and so if you have an opportunity to mention them to someone who you interact with, if you have an opportunity to bring them to a meeting, if you have an opportunity to amplify them on social media, do that, kind of lift somebody else up, because I see it, and I try now. I'm very conscious and very active of, like, how can I do that for other people, because I see how hard we work, and we really got to work kind of smarter, because our contributions are incredible.
That's really good perspective. We have a lot of good questions that I was coming to this panel with, but I'm getting the note cards, and your questions are far better, actually, so we're going to jump into the audience questions. Some really good ones. I'm going to do some rapid fire. I'm going to call some folks out. So Karen, do you think legislation is necessary to advance diversity and inclusion?
I think it was, and it continues to evolve, based on the conversations we were just having about hair, about LGBT issues, et cetera. But I also think, though, that I was having a conversation with some folks this morning. I think what we have to do, though, is that a lot of the legislation is already in place, and I think what we need to do is develop some sustainable frameworks for moving diversity and inclusion along. And as I shared this morning with some folks, it's good. We all individually do a lot of different things, but within our organizations, what we have to learn to do is build a playbook so that when we're no longer there, that it becomes part of the fabric and culture of what the organization is doing, and there's this legacy, and it will be sustainable after you leave, and make the business case for this, and make it put one leg on that stool as to why we need to have diversity and inclusion within our organizations, and making it put in that part of your business plan so that it continues to exist beyond your presence in an organization.
Excellent. Nilka, I'm curious, are you your authentic self at work? Why or why not?
Yeah, it's a great question, and maybe this is a follow-up to the hair question. So actually when I interviewed at Lyft, and tech companies generally they're younger organizations, there we go. They tend to be very casual environments in the first place, but you still have these questions about how am I showing up and how am I being received. And so I can recall when I was deciding to interview at Lyft, my hair was in braids. I was out on maternity leave and needed just easy style. And so the interviews popped up during that time, and I did think for just a brief moment, should I change my hair before I go to this interview? And then in the end, I actually saw it as an organizational test, as whether or not I would be able to sit down with these folks who didn't know me. I didn't necessarily have a reputation there, but they could just see the person and the work that I do and the contributions that I could make and evaluate me based on that. And so in the end, that was actually a really good approach. And what I found was that my hairstyle was not on the table for discussion. It was really about what I was going to bring to the company. So I would say, all in all, and this hasn't always been true, I can be honest with myself about that, about authenticity, that day to day I do bring myself, my authentic self, to pretty much every conversation that I'm in. There are those moments where you pick your battles, however. There are those moments where that being able to flex and shift is part of the strategy. And unfortunately, that is just the burden that we bear, particularly as women of color. But I choose to choose organizations where I can bring myself, and that's the choice that we have. That's not true in every company, and I can acknowledge and realize that, but I get to make the decisions about where I show up and ensure that that's part of their values are the ways that I think about what an organization needs to bring to have me there. So at this point in my life, I'm not willing to relax those requirements, and I'm going to choose organizations that allow me to be myself day to day.
Carla, I'm so curious, or the audience is, I'm now taking on first person, but one of our audience members wrote this question I think is great. What recommendation do you have for someone to gain back entry into the corporate space once they've left and they are now on the outside world? They may have been successful before, but they're in the outside world. How does an individual go about obtaining mentorship and access when you're not 30?
Yes, 3 things that I would tell you to do. The first thing is to construct your narrative. What do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? What's your value add? Why would you be good in a particular area? The reason I'm telling you to get your narrative together, because the second step is to actually start to access your network. Go back and talk to people that might still be at your organization. In fact, go talk to people that are in that aspirational organization where you want it to go. When you've been out of the corporate world for a while, I want you to change the lens and look at it as a gift. It's a chance for you actually to reset, right? Don't look at it as a liability. It's going to be difficult. Think about, in a perfect world, what would I do? Most people are out and they run right back to, I got to get a job. I got to get a job. Step back and say, you know what? I can have any job that I want. Now, what is that thing? Get my narrative together and then start talking to people that might be able to connect you back into that organization, because as you know, there's nothing better than having somebody walk your paper in as opposed to you're applying. The reason why the narrative is important is that you will now give them the script to sell you. So when you are saying, here's why I'm thinking about doing X, Y, and Z, and why I think I'd be really good at that, and what I did before while it was different, this is how it allows me to leverage that. They are listening, and then they will go back to repeat it, especially if they like you and they like the story. And then the third part of the strategy is to be relentless about it. You really have to have a plan, and I want you to take a blank sheet of paper and think about all the people that you know. The first thing we think is, I don't know anybody in that. I don't know anybody in this. But when you start looking at all the people that you know, while you may not know someone at that specific company, you probably know somebody that knows somebody in that company, and then you can start connecting the dots. But you have to be methodical and strategic about it, and that's how you can make it happen. So don't look at it as a liability that you've been out. And by the way, if you've been out taking care of your kids for 15 years or taking care of sick parents, there's probably a lot of things that you have done that where you've had to pull people together, where you've had to manage them. Think about the PTA, think about other things you did in your community, which says you are in fact a leader because you got people to do things and they weren't reporting to you and you weren't paying them. So think about how you tell your story as a leader, as someone who can get something done.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to ask Susan, if there were ever moments in your career where you felt unfulfilled or unchallenged in a particular role, what did you do?
Oh, absolutely. When I started my career in HR, when I finally moved into HR, I worked as a recruiter. And by the way, I'll validate Carla's point. Nowadays, the gap on the resume is less of an issue. So if you're the person who asked that question, I'm in HR, we hire people all day long. We literally look for people. We have a return to work program where we look for people who've taken career breaks, so it's less of an issue. But yes, absolutely. I remember I hit a point in my career where I had been recruiting for many, many years. And if you've ever been a recruiter, it's a lot of work, right? And if you did college recruiting like I did, you're traveling all over the world, you're traveling all over the country. And I remember at a certain point I got tired of it and I wanted to transition. In every company, in every profession, there's a hierarchy of jobs that some are considered premium and better than others. And if you're in HR, that premium is you want to be an HR business partner. You want to be that person who's aligned to a business, ideally a business that is revenue producing, right? You want to be the person supporting that revenue business. And I remember hitting a point where I really wanted to get out of recruiting and be an HR business partner, both because I was tired of recruiting, but also because I knew that was considered a premium job that would put me on a path to even bigger jobs. And you know what I did, quite frankly, and it's something that I think more people ought to do, is I engaged my boss. You know, sometimes when we're ready for a change, we think we have to go behind our boss and
Yes.
sneak around, and we look in the job bank and we try to apply and we go to our colleagues. If you've invested the time at a company growing your career, if you've built the right relationship with your manager, if your manager is seriously invested in your success, they should be the first person who you turn to when you're ready for more and when you're ready for something different. But you have to have invested the time before cultivating that kind of relationship with your manager or your leader, right? And so that was, I had done that. And so that was the first thing I did, is I went to my manager and I said, I'm ready for a change. And because we had an open, trusting relationship, because she knew I had her back, I was invested in doing the best job for her, whether I was in that job for another 3 weeks or another 3 years, she was ready to support my move, right? And so we literally collaborated. I collaborated with my boss on my next move, and she helped me to orchestrate that move. So yes, that has happened to me in my career. My general advice would be, you know, we talked about mentors and sponsors before, and a lot of times we think those have to be people other than our boss. Your boss can actually be a mentor and a sponsor for you too. It's not always easy, and it depends on the boss. They have to have the level of maturity to be willing to lose you because they see value in you. But if you've cultivated that kind of relationship, right, and you should try to cultivate that kind of relationship with your manager or your boss, that person can really help you on your journey to moving into the next thing and to career success.
Excellent. I've got some kind of telepathy, something. I'm reading your minds because I'm asking the right questions of the right panelists, and you guys are doing phenomenal. I'm taking lots and lots of notes, so I'm going to tweet them out after so we can make sure we can have a record of some of what they said on social media. Tanya, I'd like to ask you this question. For those that have children on the panel, I know that you have 3, right? Yes. 3 boys. Did you advance in your career while pregnant or with a newborn, or how did you navigate motherhood? What were some of the challenges of being a mom in the C-suite?
Thank you for that question. So yes, it became pretty interesting. So with my first baby, I actually just left General Motors to go work for Pepsi, and I had moved from Detroit to Portland, Oregon. And I was pregnant. I was 5 months pregnant, and had gotten a call from General Motors asking me to consider returning to take a position back in one of their largest foundries at the time to help with key negotiations. And so I thought, oh, geez, I'm honored. This is great, but I'm pregnant. And they said, okay, well, we'll wait until the baby is born, and you're ready to travel if you want to do this. And so I took them up on the opportunity, and I traveled back, and I did the assignment for about 2 years. And lo and behold, as we're just concluding negotiations, my husband and I found out we were pregnant again. And I got this call, and it said, hey, Tanya, we'd like for you to do. And I said, well, you know, I'm expecting again. And they were like, listen, and this one mentor and sponsor of mine said, you know, if you were my daughter, it would have been much more harder for me to make this call, but I really respect you and the decisions that you get to make about your career, and you're a lead candidate for an opportunity. Would you like to interview? And so I talked to my husband, and we processed it, and we said, okay, yeah, let me interview. And I got the opportunity, and I was still pregnant when I went into that role. And I got there, and 2 months later, I went out on leave, and I came back, and I was in that role for a couple of years. And then I have 2 boys now, and then I had a third, and I got a call when that baby was about 7 months old and said,
Wow.
hey, would you like to interview for an international assignment in Germany? And again, I don't know what you're going to do. Daycare is not what they normally do there. They have Tagesmutters, or they have relationships where people come and help take care of their children. But again, you're a leading candidate, and we want you to have the opportunity. So again, when you talk about sponsors and mentors, I was really fortunate that I worked for leaders and a company that said, we're not going to, in that room when they're talking about talent, we're not going to take this to her, because they were making assumptions about choices that I can make. So it was very hard, but I have an amazing spouse who's a true partner, and we often now say, even now with my 3 boys, Team Hallett, right? So what's best for Team Hallett? And so with that, Team Hallett just made a decision to move a year ago to Michigan from New Jersey, where I now have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 13-year-old, and that was huge for them to make that move. But again, we talked about it, we prayed about it. And so Team Hallett said this was a great thing for us and that they would not be broken. They would continue to do well. In fact, they're thriving in Michigan, which I'm just so incredibly grateful for. So it's been difficult, but it's been a village, and it wasn't the village I would have thought. It wasn't always, just our relatives only, but it's been certainly being clear about what our needs would be for as a family and connecting with people who have helped. And so my work family that was preparing to welcome Tanya with her 3 children and husband into Southeast Michigan, they rolled out the red carpet and made sure that all types of services and support and this extended family, from people saying, call me I'll come pick up your kids or go to the football game and so forth. So it's been difficult, but I think the message is that I've had my professional aspirations, and I've also had really clear aspirations of what I wanted for my family. And my husband and I, we've talked through those things, and we've never tried to compromise what's important regarding the family bonds, the things that are true for us as parents and for our children, and to say that we can still do that right? And there were always great opportunities. So